Welcome to the Cash Flow Project Podcast. Are you looking to better your financial situation by increasing your cash flow? Too busy to hunt for real estate deals or don't know where to start? Then you're in the right spot. Join us as we dive in and talk about investing for cash flow using multifamily real estate.
Welcome to the Cash Flow Project. I'm your host, Duke Ong with Tri-City Equity Group. Today we have Adam Carroll on the show. Through the use of the shred method, Adam paid off his home, saving over $180,000 in interest in the process. He's sharing his strategy with the world in order to help people free themselves to be themselves. Adam has published 4 books, produced a documentary on student loan debt, has a TED Talk with over 5 million views, and helps people achieve true financial freedom in their lives. More than financial freedom, Adam is all about helping people achieve time freedom, relationship freedom, and service freedom. Adam, welcome to the show.
Duke, thank you for having me. I'm super excited to be with you.
So you mentioned it's possible for anyone to be out of debt completely within 3 to 5 years. So how is that possible?
Well, the interesting thing, Duke, is it's not magic, it's math. And we as investors, our goal, and we've been trained this for decades at this point by the industry, is we want to get to that inflection point in the compound interest curve where we're going to have a doubling or two that really makes all the difference. And yet one of the things that I realized was, for most people, they're fighting the amortization table curve that's going against that compound interest curve. And so if you focus on one first, in our case, that would be paying off debt, you can actually lever up that much faster to build equity on the backside. So we in effect take discretionary funds, any extra that's there, and through the shred method, we help people create income efficiency to blast away their debt in record time, typically within that 3 to 5 year time period.
Can you share more about the shred method?
Yeah. So the shred method, it's known by a number of names, although we have, in my opinion, perfected some of the math behind it. But it's known as velocity banking. It's known as an Australian mortgage. There's a number of different ways it's marketed in the public. I think what we do differently with the shred method is we create really a behavior change in our users so they understand how to leverage their cash flow on a day-by-day, week-by-week basis to get the most benefit for them. So logistically, here's how it works, Duke. We teach people how to go out and procure or obtain a home equity line of credit. And if it's a rental property, then maybe it's a business line of credit, a BLOC, or a PLOC, a personal line of credit if someone doesn't have a property. And then that line of credit effectively becomes like your checking account. So your income gets deposited into that line of credit. The software that powers the shred method is based on about 9 complex algorithms that will calculate how to get the max use of that money in the line of credit, as well as the income that keeps dumping in every 2 weeks or a month or whenever you get paid. So in effect, what we do is we help show people through a mathematical process how to go after some of their highest interest and amortized debts over the longest period of time to eliminate the upfront interest that they'll typically pay. And in the end, they build tons of equity, they have tons of liquidity, and in the end, their expenses are minimized so that financial freedom is that much closer to them.
Got it. So is that how you paid off your house?
It is. We realized that, well, this was about 10 years ago, candidly. My wife and I had known about this model, this method called the Australian mortgage. I had found a piece of software that would actually help do the math for us. And I said, we really need to leverage this. I want to see if this works. And Duke, we took a $250,000 mortgage down to about $60,000 in 2.8 years. And in the process of doing that, I realized that one of the things I could do is continually increase the amount of line of credit that I had with, in my case, it was a credit union. So when I upped my line of credit to $150,000 and my mortgage was $60,000, I realized that I could just flip-flop the two and pay off my mortgage with my HELOC and have a much, much smaller payment. So in the end, what happened was we're living in this 5,200 square foot home. Our HELOC balance was $60,000 and our monthly payment, now it was interest only on the HELOC, But to live in our home on a month by month basis, it was somewhere around $330 to $350 a month. And you can't rent a place, even in Iowa where I live, you can't rent a place for that, let alone the place that we own. And it felt like we had gamed the system. We had figured out how to control not only our cash flow well, but to control the debt that we were paying really well. And then we realized we had the ability to leverage that line of credit into cash flow generating assets in the way, and I know you appreciate this, in the way of syndications. So we started getting into syndications at $50,000 and $100,000 a pop. And most of those come tied with a monthly income or a quarterly income at least. And so that money kept feeding back into the system, allowing us to shred the debt even faster. And I tell people this all the time, Duke, and it sounds like a pitch. I promise it's not. But when you start to do this and you do it over a 2 or 3 year period with some discipline and consistency, it is like a video game that you can't lose, particularly when your income stays, relatively consistent, which we've been able to create through my wife and I's income.
Got it. What does it take to be financially free in this day and age, especially in light of persistent inflation?
Oh man, that's a deep question, right? Financial freedom. Let me take a step back. Wealth to me is a measure of time. It's not a measure of money. So what I like to ask clients of ours in the Shred Method is, if your current income stopped tomorrow, how long could you live your life? How much in assets, how much in passive income have you created that would allow you to stop working tomorrow? And so when we start to define wealth for our clients, what we ask them is, how much longer do you think you want to work? You want to be making money to pay for the lifestyle that you've grown accustomed to. And so the idea of financial freedom is a little bit different in that if you have created enough passive income that it supersedes what your monthly expenses are, then technically you are financially free. Now, that may not necessarily mean that you're well off way into the future, but if you continually use the Shred Method strategy, and obviously the goal would be to have more income than you have expenses. But whatever you do with that surplus between your income and your expense amount, that is what we call your life factor. And the more efficient you use that life factor, the easier it is to create this ongoing perpetual financial freedom for yourself, your family, and candidly for future generations.
I see.
Did that answer your question?
Yeah, but I guess to follow up on the second part about the inflation, as inflation is a thing and we keep having, almost double-digit inflations, at least according to the CPI. Yep. Who knows what it actually is? But how would you combat that with, the passive income, and say you're like at financial freedom, but then you have to keep earning more and more just to keep up with that inflation rate? Yep.
I think the key to this, and this is a mindset, right? I think the mindset shift is, okay, you've achieved financial freedom, and some people will take their foot off the gas and they just cruise. And I think the key, particularly in an environment we're in, where inflation rate today, I think was at 8.5%, we actually have to continually invest, and we have to be seeking out higher than average returns. So, there's a number of people who come to us and say, I've done really well. I've scrimped and saved and fully funded my Roth IRA every year, and I fully fund my 401k every year. And the challenge with that is that money is only accessible to you without penalty when you turn 59 and a half. And then for only 11 years, and then there's required minimum distributions out of those accounts. So I'm encouraging our clients and friends of mine, certainly those in my community, that we look outside traditional investment vehicles, because, great, we can hope and pray to get 8 to 10% out of an S&P 500 index. But the risk is outward risk. It's Elon Musk could tweet something and the market could go south. The Federal Reserve could come out and talk about inflation or the jobs market or whatever it may be, and it's going to tweak what your returns are going to be in the market. And that's why for those that are really about financial freedom, I think you can't focus on just the market in order to get there. It has to be alternative investments like real estate, syndications, intellectual property plays, building a business, right? Whether that be an online type business, certainly building infinite banking policies. I know you've had Mark Willis on the show in the past. I'm a big believer in life insurance as a hedge against market volatility in the future. So I think we have to be thinking differently about financial freedom, not just how am I going to make more money? It's really about protecting the assets you have and then being able to weather financial storms, the likes of which we're experiencing and probably will for the next 24 months, in my estimation.
Speaking of infinite banking, can you tell me more about that and what kind of strategies you use?
Yeah. So the shred method for me was all about, at first, it was all about debt reduction. And my goal was to have minimal bills. Because as you start paying everything off using shred, there's no car payment, there's no credit card payments, no student loan payments. Eventually, the mortgage payment is next to nothing. And at that point, it's pretty easy to create financial freedom. Because for me, I make my living as a speaker. Obviously, we have the shred method, which is a software product. But from a speaking perspective, I need 1 gig a month to really cover my monthly expenses. And then what I realized was the shred method wasn't just about minimizing debt. It was building equity in the property. And equity in your property is akin to liquidity when you have a line of credit tied to it. And so I started going down this path of, okay, I'm more liquid. Where should that liquidity go? Because in your home, if you have equity in your home, there's no internal rate of return, right? You're going to earn 3% or 5% or 10% appreciation because the property is appreciating, not because the money is working for you. And so I started digging into what are some of the ways that the wealthy protect their wealth and how do they pass it to future generations? And I was turned on to a book by R. Nelson Nash called Becoming Your Own Banker, and then started really digging into the infinite banking model and realized that the reason that they don't work for most people is most people are putting a little bit in every single month in their insurance policy. So they'll have a $500 or $800 or $1,500 premium every single month that they're paying on. And at some level, that monthly premium feels like, man, this is just another nut to crack. I got to make more money to cover my premium. And so what I did differently, and this is what we really encourage folks to do who are using the shred method, is you want a big premium that will go into those infinite banking policies. You want to overfund the policies and have a high cash value. And the way to do that from day one is you stroke a check out of your HELOC for 25 or 50 grand. And you're going to do that every year for 4 or 5 or 7 years. And over that course of time, you're going to amass hundreds of thousands of dollars in that infinite banking policy that then needs a place to go because that's like a holding tank, a bucket. So when we empty that bucket, we empty it into syndications at 100 or 200 grand a clip, knowing that we're going to make a monthly income on those, which then just feeds right back into the policy or right back into the HELOC, depending on which is more interest advantage for us to do. And our software spells all that out for you. So I maintain, Duke, that within 10 years, someone could be financially free using the shred method as step 1, infinite banking as step 2, and passive income investing as step 3, where you're looking for massive, passive, permanent streams of income through real estate, syndications, IP, what have you.
So what kind of infinite banking products do you use, like whole life or EIULs, or which ones?
Yeah, so my 2 policies are whole life policies. And we've looked at IULs for our kids just from a growth perspective over time. So right now, our overfunded whole life policies are really the kind of the bread and butter for us. And I'll tell you that I'm not opposed to IULs at all. I think for us, what we were investing into, it made more sense to have a guaranteed set return, distributions from the company. And in effect, we just knew that if we could manage somewhere between 4.5% and 6% returns on the policy over the coming 30 years, it's a big shiny pile of money that we can live on, well into our 90s. The kids policies with IULs, and we're we're almost at a point where we're pulling the trigger on this for them. But my goal is to have my kids have their own real estate wealth building funds in their mid 20s. And to do that, we're going to start out with, relatively moderate policies in the 10 grand premium range for 4 or 5 years. But by the time they're in their early 20s, they'll have 50 grand sitting there that could be a downstroke on a duplex or triplex. It could be money. I mean, candidly, it could be money they go use to see the world and, live in a van somewhere for a year or whatever. I don't really care what they do with it. But the goal is to teach them that this is the foundational bank that you will grow your wealth upon. And there will be more accounts like this as they have kids and their kids have kids.
So do you have it in their names or in your name?
Great question. The way we start them is my wife and I are the owner, and I believe we've split it. I have some, she's going to have some. Because obviously when you buy a policy, there are 3 positions to fill. You are the owner, you're the beneficiary, or you're the insured, and you can only be 2 of those. So with our kids, typically we're going to be the owner and the beneficiary. They are the insured. And then at some point, when they cross over an age threshold and we really see that they understand it well, we'll probably hand it over to them as the owner.
Got it. Is there an age minimum for them or?
I believe the age minimum is 14. Don't quote me on that. I know we tried to do it when my youngest son was 11 or 12, and they came back and said, we won't put a policy on a kid that young. And I don't know if that's a life expectancy thing or the cost may be prohibitive for the insurance company, not for us, but for the insurance company over the long haul. So I'm sure that's all worked out by an actuary somewhere.
Yeah, I mean, if you think about the actuarial science, right? Like someone who's younger has a much longer life, right? So
Totally. And could take advantage of it. They're coming up with new insurance products all the time. I'm in Des Moines, Iowa, which is the 2nd or 3rd insurance capital of the United States. So I have friends literally who will call and say, we're trying to come up with new products to create. What should we do? And I keep throwing them ideas, hoping that we're going to get a really investor advantaged account, made by a local firm. It hasn't happened yet.
Oh. So on your TED Talk, you were talking about teaching your kids about money through the game of Monopoly. What advice do you have for parents to teach their kids about money?
Well, so first of all, I love this question because for me, I kind of stumbled over the realization that I'd made. And I had been speaking on college campuses for about 15 years. I've spoken on 750 different campuses across the country. And at every one of them, I would ask students, how much will you have in student loan debt when you graduate? And Duke, what do you think the number one answer was?
100,000.
They said, I don't know.
Oh.
That was the number one answer from the majority of students I talked to. They had no clue how much they borrowed. And I would further the conversation with them by saying, tell me about how you spend money. How do you make financial decisions? Are your parents involved? And the lion's share of them who said, I don't know, also said, my parents make all my financial decisions. And it occurred to me that 18 to 24-year-olds, if they're not financially astute enough to fill out a FAFSA, as an example, the free application for federal student aid, or to determine whether or not they should have $1,000 minimum limit or a $1,000 limit credit card. If they don't know that, they need to know that by the time they're 18. And so my kids were fairly young. We were playing a game of Monopoly on the dining room table one Saturday. And I just noticed that they were more about moving pieces and rolling the dice than they were about the slips of paper that they were handing back and forth. Almost like the money didn't really matter. It was just superfluous to the game. The game was really roll the dice, move the pieces. And I understand why. It was fun. It's fun playing with them. But I also started to wonder, are they doing this because the money isn't real? And if the money isn't real to them now, what if it isn't real to them when they're 18 or 24? And so I went to my credit union on a Friday afternoon and I said, I need $10,000. Actually, I said I need $9,990 because there's all sorts of IRS paperwork they have to fill out. But I need $9,990 in these denominations of bills. and I need it out of my home equity line of credit. So they go and they pull all this money out, and the people, the tellers behind the window, were all asking me, "What are you doing with this money? What is this for?" And I said, "Oh, I'm going to the casino. I'll be back in 30 minutes. Don't worry about it." And then they pressed me, and I said, "No, here's what I'm doing." And they said, "Come back and tell us how the game went." So Sunday morning, I lay out the Monopoly board. I lay out the $10,000 in cash, and we played a game of Monopoly. And true to my hypothesis, Duke, my kids played differently. And I made the assumption, I made the connection that they played differently because there was real money at stake. And if I'm going to teach anything to parents about how to parent around money, my one key core observation that I made was we started putting money in our kids' hands at a very early age and let them make the decision. So they started getting an allowance, which was based on the chores that they did at home. But they didn't have a choice. The chores had to be done or they didn't get an allowance. So there was no commission paid or the chance to opt out or anything like that. And as they got money and started to make decisions with money, they were making better and better and better decisions. They were more informed. They were somewhat conservative. They started saving money, investing money. So for parents out there, what I would tell you is, if you are making all of your kids' financial decisions, you are setting them up for failure between 18 and 30. But if you are letting them make a majority of their financial decisions between, let's say, even 8 years of age and 18, you are setting them up for financial success because they'll already have made enough mistakes that they know what not to do when they turn 18. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that's great advice. It's just all about giving them more autonomy to figure it out for themselves, right?
100%. And the challenge inherent in that, is as parents, we want to have some control over what our kids buy. And my wife and I would go head to head on this because she'd say, they shouldn't spend their money on that. And I'd say, hun, it's their money. That's the key. They need to be allowed to make the decisions, because if they fall down and we can coach them on the fall, then they'll learn the next time and they won't make that mistake. But if we keep pulling back, what they can do with that money, they will have a negative connotation to the money because it feels like it's not theirs to begin with. So I think so much of this has to do with our money behavior, and our money mindset is shaped from the time we're 0 to 9 years of age. And so it's all about what we're saying to our kids around money and the language we use. Like, we would never say we're broke or we can't afford it. Instead, we would say things like, well, that's not part of our plan this month, or that's something that we put money away for, or we plan to make those purchases. That's not something we're going to do in the moment. Now, in the back of my mind, at the time when they were young, I might have thought, I can't afford that. We're broke. We're not doing that. But I wouldn't say it. I would say instead, oh, that's not part of our budget this month, or we're only buying what we need, not what we want on this trip. And I think when you are really careful about your language, the kids pick up on that and they start using that kind of language and logic when the money is in their hands.
Yeah, it's amazing what they pick up, even at a super young age.
Crazy. They're always listening, always. Even when we're not sure they are. I remember as a kid, my parents would fight about money. And I never knew what it was officially about, but I knew it had something to do with bills that came due, or my dad spending more than he should have, or my mom freaking out about how something was going to get paid. And it occurred to me later in life that part of the reason that I somewhat capitulated to my wife's money mindset was I just never wanted to fight about it. And candidly, she was way more savvy than I was when we started. And she's really good at defense and I'm really good at offense. So the two of us together make a great team. But I remember thinking, we're not going to fight about money. I'm not going to do that because I saw too much of it growing up.
Yeah, it's amazing how our upbringing affects our psychology and all of our behaviors now, right? And it takes a lot of reprogramming to kind of delete some old programs that aren't useful to us anymore and evolve into the better ones.
Not only that, but even to root them out, to figure out what is, a good case in point. I've had people tell me, Oh, I always have to get a deal. I have to find discounts. I have to find coupons. And at some level, I'll say, well, where do you think that comes from? They never really thought about it. It's just like, oh, well, it's smart to be frugal and thrifty. It's prudent, right? And then as we start digging down, it's like, yeah, because you're the environment in which you grew up experienced lack and scarcity, and that was the only way to have those things. So while it is smart and it's a good way to operate, it also may be getting in your way at some level of what you truly want, which might be abundance. And so I've taken some of my cues from a book called Secrets of the Millionaire Mind by T. Harv Eker. It would shock me if you haven't read it, Duke, but it's a great, great book. And in the book, he said, if you want to change the fruits, you must first change the roots. And so the fruit in our lives is whatever is our experience, right? Our results, our financial status, our happiness, whatever it may be. And if you want to change what those results are, you actually have to change the roots of that tree first, which go back to what did you hear growing up? And is that true for you now, or do you need to reorient your mindset to something different than what it might currently be?
That makes a lot of sense. All right. So you actually just answered the first question in the fire round already. So might as well move on to the second one.
Love it.
What is your superpower?
Oh, man. I love this question because I really do think people have them. And I think my superpower, what people tell me my superpower is anyway, is the ability to connect the dots. And I will have conversations with people regularly who will say, I really want to do this, but I have no idea how to do it. Or I really want to create financial freedom, but I'm stuck in this job. Or I really want to travel the world, but I have no idea how to, make money and do that at the same time. And every one of those cases are real life stories that I've walked through with people. And literally we just spell out, and on a whiteboard kind of is my favorite way to do this, but I'll just map out like, well, you got to do this, and here's your leap number. And this is where the money goes and comes from. And here's how you would do that. And within like 3 months, they're doing what they want to do. So I think my superpower is connecting dots for people about what they want and how to get from where they are to where they want to go.
All right. What is the biggest lesson that you've learned over your career?
Have great mentors. That's probably the greatest lesson I've learned. I spent a number of years running into the same brick wall over and over and over again. And then I realized I got a lot of really smart people. And candidly, I call them my super friends, but I got a lot of super friends around me who are more than willing to help me get what I want to achieve in life. But I wasn't really asking for help. And when I went to them and said, I need some coaching, I need some guidance, I need some mentorship, they all stepped up. And I have this really amazing group of, a great support group, a group of mastermind partners who I'll throw a challenge out and they just go at it, with brilliant minds. And it's always amazing to me that I can be in my own way and then throw it to 5 people to solve. And they give me, 1, 2, sometimes 5 different, but really successful ways of navigating whatever I'm going through. So the lesson I've learned is mentorship. If you don't have them, find them.
Agreed. For the busy working professional working towards financial freedom, what advice do you have?
You can't, 2 things. Number 1, you're not going to save your way to financial freedom. So the whole idea of, cut out the lattes and all that mumbo jumbo that people share, it's valid and valuable for a certain subset of the population. But I like Starbucks. I'm addicted to Starbucks. I'm not going to cut out lattes. And candidly, $5 at a time, I ought to be way better at making money that's not even a concern for me. I think for the working professional, one of the things that you do have to do is you have to play really, really good offense, meaning get better and better at whatever it is you do so that your time becomes so valuable, you can make more in an hour than most people can make in a month. And if you can get to that point, which it may take some time, but the more you hone your skills and the better you get and the more you're in demand, the more money you make. At that time, my hope for you is that you build a bigger life, not a bigger lifestyle. because the lifestyle choices makes our expenses greater. But a bigger life could just be spending more time with your family and friends, going to events, hanging out at the park, doing things with loved ones that don't cost a fortune to do. When you build a bigger life, not a bigger lifestyle, all of the extra money that you have just goes to wealth building. And if you focus on that for 2 to 5 years, I truly believe that anyone can build their own level of financial freedom in that amount of time. They just have to be really intentional about how they do it.
Couldn't agree more. So how can our audience get in touch with you?
The best way, Duke, is to check out theshredmethod.com. We have a free savings analysis on the page, which if you plug in your income and your expenses and your mortgage balance, any debt you have, it'll kick out how fast you can be completely out of debt. And know that some people, it's not about being completely out of debt. It might be about re-leveraging, redeploying the equity, but we can show you how to do that too. Theshredmethod.com is the best place for that. If you want to see my TED Talk, I did a documentary on student loan debt. There's a number of other videos out there. You can check all that out at Adam Carroll with 2 R's and 2 L's .info. AdamCarroll.info is my site.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for being on the show.
Duke, thanks for having me.